Hmm.
Okay, welcome back to the Tales of TIC for another episode. And today we have a really special guest, Graham Millar, who's a contact of mine, an industry expert and executive. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Thomas. It's been a nice opportunity that you've given me here. So I hope you find my additional tales are interesting to your audience, and we'll see how it goes anyway. But
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll jump just straight onto the first question. Can we go back in time, and are you able to give us an understanding of your life and how you got here today? Maybe a little bit on the professional journey as well.
yeah, in terms of my experience within the tech industry, I mean, obviously I've got a few years under my belt. Having recently retired from SGS, which was one of the biggest tech companies, going in terms of the global market. So I was fortunate enough to reach, a fairly senior position as global manager, responsible for measurement calibration services. That covered the energy sector. It covered food and beverage. It covered things like aerospace. It covered things like railways. So basically, any sector, business sector, which had instrumentation that needed calibration.
Right.
And that was split into a number of different areas within the tech industry. We had the consultancy work, we had the inspection work,
Mm.
and that, brought out a number of very interesting opportunities for me. Um, Within SGS, I mean, I was there for about 27 years. So if you want to wind the clock back a little bit, how did I get to SGS? That was a convoluted story. I started off very, very quickly. I didn't want to be an engineer. I was actually training to be a management accountant, which was
Right.
so boring. I went for my first interview, and the guy, interviewed me, and he said afterwards, "Well, you got the job." And I said, "Okay, disappointed to hear that, but I've got another job that you might be interested."
Ah.
So that's the way I got into engineering. And, I then went back to college and did more engineering stuff instead of, accountancy. And that's the way I brought myself into the business, which is not planned. Like most of us, things evolve. They never are, I'm going to be
Yeah.
this, I'm going to be that. So that brought me into the energy sector, yeah, in terms of engineering, not specifically tech. But over the initial years, I was in a number of companies manufacturing, Johnson and Johnson, who I'm sure you know. And then I got into heavy engineering, and then I transferred my skills that I sort of was acquiring into the energy sector. So when I landed in SGS, I was engineering manager responsible for the North Sea, uh, primarily for measurement calibration services. Then that expanded into, a few jobs in Africa, a few jobs here, a few jobs there. And I think one of the pivotal ones for me in terms of that was, moving into places like Iraq, which SGS was fortunate enough to land one of the biggest sort of measurement projects and inspection projects, looking after the crude oil that was being exported just after the wars finished in Iraq, and we were brought in by the American government. So things like that, they don't happen every day. Can you help us rebuild this? Can you put the systems back in place? So that was, me looking after a sort of team of about 30 odd people any one time on a rotational basis, and looking after a country's export of crude oil, which was, not something that you find one person is responsible for on a daily basis. So that was quite challenging. And then over the years, I've worked with many financial institutions. I've worked in particularly, you're a tech company. Can you help us with an independent, opinion
Right.
on an engineering project, to make sure that it's compliant to particular standards and services and regulatory, issues and local things, or national things or international things. So that is kind of how I came from where I started in the management, accountancy market, and then moved my way into engineering. And then, as I say, in SGS, started off in the North Sea, and then transferred into the global position, and sort of ended up in a sort of CEO -2 position within the company, which was quite nice. So I found my and forwarded years in SGS to be very, very how can I put it, interesting. It's not every day that some of the things that we got to do happen to you. So it was a very interesting company. I have a great respect for the company and for the profession in terms of being a third party entity, and you know that's the
Mhm.
story about how it's passed. So
Yeah,
have you
we've
got any comment on that?
yeah, well, we've I think put quite a lot of the time. People don't grow up wanting to be a professional in the tech industry. They often fall into it. So that's usually the response. But we also see that people quite often fall in love with it as well and don't leave and just seem to stay in this industry because of um, the diversity in industries and regions, and it's just one of those underbelly industries that your day-to-day pedestrian won't know about, but is integral, that they can walk down that pavement or have that phone to their ear. And I think ultimately that's just why a lot of people end up staying, because the opportunities and the what the industry gives them. So no, I appreciate the detail on that.
I mean, one thing for me it was quite interesting is everybody's career is a little bit bumpy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get things, bad things happen. So within the first formative years, I mentioned I was in the sort of manufacturing sector, where things were being produced, and that's what your engineer associated with. And, I got my fair share of, I lost my job twice due to industrial action by unions, nothing to do with me. Again, part of the journey, but bumpy. And then you find out very successful company I joined, and we rocketed because we were winning huge amount of orders. The
Mm.
company then had a cash flow problem because it couldn't keep up with the money coming in, so the bank foreclosed on these things. So
Yeah.
within the tech industry is different because you're there to ensure that things are fit for purpose.
Mm.
And it kind of protects you because it's, as you mentioned earlier and alluded to, uh, you have to make sure that things are designed properly, they're manufactured properly, and they operate correctly and safely and all the rest of it. So there's a lot of ticks and a lot of boxes. So that's why I found the tech industry to be very interesting. It was kind of secure because you kind of feel
Yeah.
that somebody needs that service, and it's not like a manufacturing which is under different pressures and economic pressures and so on. But on the tech side, if you cut out that piece of the jigsaw, is going to lead you in a very distorted you know picture, if you like. So yeah, that's what I found. As you say, tech's been good to me. I've met a lot of interested people through my journey, and that's from the Far East to the Middle East to North America to South America, globally. And I think that's what made it really an interesting journey for me. That helps you create uh, your own character.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the skills that you pick up along the way. Sometimes it's not about you, it's about what you see and how you absorb that information and then transpose that information into your job. So, that's been for me very, very interesting. And I really enjoyed it. I loved it, over the years
Yeah.
in this. So.
Think yeah, you just touched on skills. It's the next question coming up, really. I was interested to hear your thoughts on what you believe are the key qualities or skills that make a successful sales leader.
I think in terms of being successful in sales, I've seen many people involved in sales. You've got the guy who's the sales guy who's good at selling anything.
Yeah.
Might be absolutely useless, but he can sell it. So you've got that type of selling, and then you've got the how do you sell tech services to people? And again, it goes back to what you said earlier a little bit, that to be successful in sales, you have to have the grounding in the elements. And in my case, it was engineering associated
Yes.
with metrology, with calibration of instrumentation. Now that covers, everything from transmitters, measure pressure, temperature, flow, to how do we record that information, which is computers, it's software, it's mechanical components, electronic components. And that is where I found having the sales knowledge and the ability to put the technical and the sales together. Because in the tech industry, you sometimes I think, I mean, I've been put in front of very difficult clients in Russia where they have a dispute. And they want somebody to be their knight in shining armor, if you know what I mean. They come in and tell us this is the correct way to do it, or this is the wrong way to do it, or they've had something done which is not correct, and you're that
Mhm.
ombudsman who is the person that's going to say, I think that's correct, or I think that's incorrect. So they're going to look at you as a company within the tech business and say, you're an industry expert in that particular field. But again, on the sales side, you're selling yourself, you're selling your business primarily and the services that go with it. It's not just about me, it's about the people that were in my team and how they promote themselves. Like most people, if you have a person which is, very effective, very good with people. So your sales skills are connected to people skills. What are the people skills? It may well be connected to that particular specific engineering forte. And that is what I found, if you go in there and you talk the wrong talk, then your sales are zero. So to connect, my sales maybe are focused on making sure that the clients are going to get a good service. They're going to get a good return on the investment that they're going to have in your business that you're trying to sell to them. And in many respects, it's not just about, a salesman who sells widgets.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from. So the knowledge that you bring with sales in people in my team, I mean, you've got people who have different traits. You've got people who are team players. You've got people who are lone wolves. All these different traits you get in personnel. Somebody's not necessarily fit for purpose to do sales. And we had different characters in our team who you say, no, I wouldn't do that because he's not the best person. So you have people who acquire skills. Yeah. So as I was saying there, the situation is about how you take the knowledge and package that into a sales approach.
Yeah.
And I think, my experience, I've got things wrong and you learn by your mistakes where you lose business because what you did was the wrong thing. But, I think in many cases, you have to, what's the word now, grasp, you know, the opportunity. And if you think, and I think I've been fairly good at that through industry, where you sit and listen to the client and then suddenly the light bulb moment comes on and you go, I know what I can do here. And 9 times out of 10, that's worked,
Yeah.
and then you take it forward. So, I've been fortunate in that respect to have opportunities globally again. I mean, from South America to North America to Canada, there's always been something, and you never get everything 100%. You're going to get, a learned lesson. I didn't do that right. Next time I do it, I'll change my approach in a sales way. It might be doing a proposal in a certain way. You make it short but full of the correct content. It goes across well. It's perceived as being very professional.
Yeah.
It's not done, on a scrappy piece of paper. It's done in a very professional way. And again, my role in this is to make sure that the client in the tech business feels comfortable with the service he's going to get from the company that you're working for. So again, I think, within SGS when I was there and within the other companies, I've always tried to promote that professional approach, which gives them a nice feeling of comfort that they are cushioned by ourselves and providing the service, and they're not going to be exposed to any nasties that might come along. So that again's been interesting, and it helps you, and it's respected as well. That you find people look at you and say, so you're one of the experts in this field.
Yeah.
We still to contact you, and so on and so forth.
So that's
So
this. Yeah, they often say it's like, don't worry about selling, just know everything and know everyone, and then the selling does the rest for you. I'd be interested to hear your take on the other side of the business, on operations. What leadership qualities do you believe are essential for an operational leader to be successful?
I think in terms of that one, that's a combination of many things. One, you have to be knowledgeable in the role, but at the same time, you have to be popular with the people.
Mm.
You have to be smart and sometimes a little bit foxy, if you understand what I mean. Sometimes you know that you can't say this. Sometimes you have to say the right thing. So it's that combination of, you know, looking, listening, then deciding what is the best course of action. And in terms of operational leadership, I've had very difficult situations with many different people. I've had to fire people, I've had to hire people. And sometimes people can't do the job, they don't have the skills that they purport to have. So you can't put them forward. So you have to make a decision. The guy is not fit for purpose because is going to cause exposure. So sometimes you've got difficult decisions and you maybe have to let people go, or maybe you don't hire them in the first place. So what you're trying to do is build a very constructive team, and you are taking your own skills that you acquired as you and I would go for interviews and maybe get assessments on your capabilities, psychiatric testing and all these sort of things, which I don't like, by the way. I never every time I went for one of these things, I always found out I didn't get the job. So I must be really quite dense, or I don't know how to approach these things. But they never did it for me. I always like the face to face confrontation, and either somebody says I like this person,
Yeah.
and I think it's a character. I'm sure you understand when you interview somebody, and I've interviewed many different nationalities. I had many different people working with me. So maybe people from the Middle East, you have to approach them a certain way because of the ethnic sort of background that they've got.
Mhm.
Religion, you can go up here and hug a lady in the UK, because of success, but you don't do that in the Middle East. You understand what I mean? You understand these characteristics about the local environment. And that is very, very important if you're working in the tech business, because it can mean I don't like you because you have broken one of the laws. You've done something which is not seen as being very professional. And things like that I've tried to accommodate, and my team has as well. So when it comes to this, you're passing down the knowledge that you have to your team, and you're seeing how things have progressed and in different locations, and made sure that you try to do the best you can to deliver a responsible approach, if you like. So going back to your leadership qualities, I think you've got to sort of try and identify what the issues are and how to manage these problems that may arise throughout, whether it's sales. And in many cases, you're front facing with clients, whether it's on a video call, whether it's over internet, or whether it's face to face. And it really does matter, that
Yeah.
to have um, there's some so places where I have been dealing with for 20 years now, and people know me in all sorts of places, and we might get a few years older, but people respect people. They come back to you asking for assistance, so that obviously tells its own story.
Mhm.
That's all about the team that you have, maybe you, maybe others within the team, who are offering something which is accommodating, and at the same time offering them some sort of support and value for money as well, as from a tech perspective.
Yeah.
I know that sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. So the only way I've been told that you learn lessons, and everybody knows this one, is by making mistakes.
Just
And
not too many mistakes, please. That's the only rule.
no, I can't think of too many, but there is always a few that you make, and as I say, that's the way the world works. If you really do, you don't do it again. So for sure, that being an operational leader to be successful in terms of the qualities with people, is to encourage, is to listen,
Yeah.
is to advise them of how not to do it, and at the same time look at good practices that people have acquired, and you've seen these things happening, and try and take that forward in a positive way. So I think
Right.
that's very, very fundamental. So I
Yeah.
hope you agree with that anyway, or at least find that useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to a bit more of a holistic question around the industry. What do you think the current market trends and opportunities within the TIC industry?
Certainly within my own area, which is metrology calibration services, is huge. There's been a big push in energy, for example. There's been a transition away from oil and gas to new, energy sources
Yeah.
because of environmental pressures. You've got carbon capture, which has to be measured, has to be, done by sort of some means. You've got things like the LNG market, liquefied natural gas, which has become huge. We've got all these tankers all over the world transferring gas from the Middle East to America, to the UK, to all over the place. Again, that has to be measured. So in each one of these cases, you're moving from traditional oil and gas services into a new area, which is rapidly expanding. So that, I've certainly found that there's new regulations, there's new procedures, you've got additional business on ships, you've got additional facilities, and then moving across into going away from the energy sector and looking at environmental issues, you've got things like what goes into the atmosphere now has to be measured. The flaring, big problems with particulates going into the atmosphere, which shouldn't be. So they need somebody to measure that independently. And again, that's tech companies coming to that area. But then moving across into food and beverage, again, and suddenly there's a new market kind of exploded there for the tech industry in the same way. Measuring quantities in bottles of beer, in bottles of anything from any sort of liquid that is consumed. It has to be Q and Q quality and quantity to make sure they optimize the package that they're actually selling. So in many cases, we've been brought in to calibrate equipment, make sure that that's been done independently. And then again, moving into the pharma business, very, very similar there, where you've got the energy sector, metrology, moving into all these other areas, because it has to be measured. They have to look at the quality, the compositional analysis of it, and things like hydrogen. So these are some of the new areas that I've been fortunate enough to sort of move into, and these are evolving. As we hear every day, um, electrical vehicles. We're sort of touching on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, is it going to be electric? Is it going to be hydrogen? Is it going to be petrol, diesel? All these things are measurable components which companies need to understand and make sure they don't get ripped off by,
Yeah.
is a gallon a gallon, is a liter a liter? Are you getting 50% water in something it shouldn't be there? And again, you're looking at the quality. So as a tech company, these are areas where it's expanding and where there's a potential market. And I'm sure that will continue. Other things like the Far East, they manufacture a lot of vessel ships,
Yeah.
which are consumed by Western companies. But to operate within the
Mm.
European theatre, you need European compliance. So again, there's regulations in Europe. So if you build a ship in China, that has to work in Europe
Yes.
to be compliant to European regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's a new area where people are saying, I need a company understands this. And that's, some of the companies that are about today that, like SGS and others, they're accommodating these new requirements for manufacturing it to be a, tech service. So again, these are new opportunities that certainly I see. And I think the industry will just continue to grow and grow and grow. And obviously, I always deal with energy, I always deal with metrology. There's other areas, as you well know, in the tech business,
Yeah.
which I'm not an expert in. But certainly from my perspective, it's continuously growing. And I suppose over the next couple of years, it will continue to grow. So
Very good. Thank you. I think, just turning back the clock, it would be really interesting to understand from your side, if you could give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
uh, I think probably if I was going to look back at that, I'd probably do things maybe a little bit differently. But you always say that. I probably should have studied a bit harder. But instead of going down the pub, um, I think everybody got tendency to be either a bit of a bookworm or one of the boys or girls or whatever, and you sort of do what you like to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, although I passed my management exams for accountancy because I thought that was where I wanted to go, um, it wasn't really suitable for me. So again, and I think as many people I've known who set out in life to study something, whether they are university, college, or an apprenticeship, and you end up doing something totally different.
Yeah, I did geology at university and fell into recruitment. So it's
Yeah,
like,
well, that's exactly it. So, I understand that. And I don't think there's maybe one or two exceptions that I know people who, want to be a pilot. I can know one person who left school, joined the Air Cadets and became a pilot with British Airways. So, I mean, that you say is quite you know, nice thing. The guy who
yeah,
into flying,
yeah,
But anyway, in terms of what I would do better, probably, I should have focused a little bit better on the direction of travel, but I didn't. And getting to where I was probably took me a little bit longer. Um, there was one other thing in my history of SGS. I got a chance to move into a role in Azerbaijan a couple of years ago,
right.
and I didn't take it. And I think if I had done that at that time, it would have been different for me. I would have moved a little bit higher up the ladder quicker.
Hmm.
I was a little bit stunted. But when I wasn't 21 then. But certainly when I was 21, you tend to, you're not taking life as serious as maybe you should.
Yeah,
When you're 50, that's different. Maybe you're feeling, I've got a mortgage, I've got this, I've
yeah.
got that.
The,
Uh, so,
we
exactly.
have lots of people we have on. They reference that sort of ability to take risks. As being a regret. Sometimes it seems as though you've mentioned earlier in the podcast you kind of like to take a risk and be intuitive about the way that you sell and stuff like that. I wonder on what about the side of sort of work life balance. Have you always had a good eye for that, or no?
Probably not. I mean, I tend to work more than the life side of things. I put
Yeah.
second. So I'm a bit boring when it comes to what recreational things do you do? So probably the answer to that one is not very good at doing that. You know, I think that the problem in my role in the tech business, and I think tech business very general, is because you know so many people, I get to know a lot of people. And because of the role I had, you are getting people contacting you from the Far East, the Middle East, and the Americas. And that could be at, 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody phones you and you go, oh, blast, I should have switched it off. And then you get the opposite end, later on during the night. Uh, I just think that makes you a bit of a dull person, probably.
Yeah.
Everybody's about, you do fishing, you do golfing, you do football, you do whatever. Um, and I've known a lot of people, and some people in the tech business do golf, but they don't do it a lot because the job it's quite busy, And I think you have to get that, should I do this or should I not do this?
Mm.
And I think everybody's different. I've tried to focus on making sure that the job, I worried a lot. Like I've
Yeah.
always worried a lot.
Yeah.
So you go to bed in the evening and you think, how am I going to do this presentation to all these people? Because obviously you're responsible for, a big sales portfolio.
Mhm.
Or maybe you're going to do a technical discussion in a different country with different people, whether it's places like Bangladesh, where you are dealing with the government, or you are dealing with people in Iraq, or you're dealing with Americans, different audiences. So, yourself when you do a presentation. I think the worst time I had, I was asked to do a presentation in uh, Cote d'Ivoire for
Right.
the United Nations.
Wow.
And I was asked to do a paper on, project monitoring. And I did this and I went there and I got told some porcupines. There was an audience of about 800 people. And I didn't know this. And the guy who was on before me was the vice president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, and I went on next. And I was on the huge stage with the podium. My presentation was behind me and it wasn't on the monitor
Yeah.
because they didn't do that. So, that's a horrible moment where you have to face life in a difficult way.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the worst moments I've had actually. Just linear, which you've prepared for, but the unexpected's happened, and it's not exactly the way you wanted it. But anyway, that's just another story. But I think it's quite a good one. So
Very good. Yeah, I think risk, worrying, work-life balance, studying hard, probably all waypoints in that question. But equally, yeah, just as you'd said, you kind of make your way through life, and you take the opportunities you think are right for you at the time, and you can't look back with any regrets, can you? Because that's just a bad way to view life, really. So
yeah, I mean, in terms of risk, I mean, I think you always play straight down the middle. I've never really. I mean, I had a big project where this is before SGS, and it was working within a pharmaceutical environment where I was the engineer responsible for signing off, completions.
right.
One of the completions failed, and this was during testing,
Mhm.
and 25 ton of steelwork became dislodged from a structure. And that happened during testing, but the problem was I signed everything off. So, of course, you're in a situation where you're a responsible person, and then there's an investigation. That was not nice, but
Mm,
I didn't do it wrong. But these are the things within the tech industry you have to take responsibility for.
mm,
Otherwise, you shouldn't be in the job. That's what I'm saying. And I think that's the situation that I've managed to acquire these skills where you feel comfortable in making a decision on things like that, and you think it's the correct path of approach, if you like. So anyway, as I say, I've always tried to be truthful. If I'm not sure, I'll say I'm not sure, and I think that's apart from taking risks, don't take a risk that you don't feel comfortable with,
yeah,
and I think that's the best advice I can give people. And I think that you get respect from people by doing that. So.
for sure. Well, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for coming on and supporting the Tales of TIC. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've offered a unique perspective within the industry. You're one of the leading execs within the calibration market and broader energy sector. So, yeah, I really appreciate you spending the time, and maybe we'll see you again.
No, thanks, Thomas, for the opportunity. It's been very, very interesting. So hopefully I wasn't too boring, and people will find some of my comments, worthwhile and interesting. So thank you, and catch you later. Okay.
Very good. Thank you.